This episode is brought to you by Commerce, parent company of BigCommerce, Feedonomics, and MakeSwift.
What I'm really excited about, and I'll stick to kind of retail here for a second, is this idea that every retail company is going to become more than just the products and the goods that they offer. I think most of them are also going to become service companies. I think intelligence and knowledge, they're just going to become plentiful. And so all of a sudden, what we think of normally as retail businesses, they're going to start to become these hybrid retail and service businesses. And so now the question becomes, well, as a retailer, what services can I offer my customer?
Welcome to Retail Remix. Without a doubt, one of the most substantive impacts of AI at retail this year has been in the realm of marketing. In today's episode, we sit down with Andrew Bielecki, the co-founder and CEO of Klaviyo, who has been in the marketing automation game since long before AI entered the everyday conversation. We'll get Andrew's take on what's real and what's still science fiction when it comes to AI, and how marketers can prepare for the future. Welcome back to Retail Remix. I'm your host, Nicole Silberstein, editor-in-chief at Retail Touchpoints, and today we have with us Andrew Bielecki, co-founder and CEO of Klaviyo. Thanks for being here, Andrew.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Nicole.
So people who've listened to the podcast frequently know that I've said this many times, but only because it's true. I'm a total sucker for a founder story. So if you don't mind, I was hoping you would start by telling us about how the idea for Klaviyo came about, the origin story, if you will, and how it's evolved into the company that we all now know today.
Yeah, for sure. So, Klaviyo, I think, is about to turn 14 or 15 years old.
Wow, so a teenager.
We're into our teenage years here, yep. And yeah, my co-founder and I, Ed, we'd worked with a bunch of enterprise retailers and other big consumer companies. You can think of banks. I know there's some big amusement parks in there. And you can think of these are iconic businesses, right? Starbucks, Walmart, Bank of America, businesses like that. And we were helping them understand, first and foremost, who their end consumers were, who were the customers that maybe had bank deposits or, were buying a latte, storing stuff, cash for Starbucks, and helping them figure out how to optimize that experience. And this is back in the mid 2000s. And we just thought this is so obviously the future. Every business is going to have some technology that's going to allow them to understand who their customers are. And then we really wanted to, make that available. So the actual experience, whether it's cross marketing, cross service, in store, online, was just excellent. It was fit to every single consumer. So that wasn't a new idea, but we felt like what was missing was we wanted to give every business this kind of digital brain. My co-founder and I were big database nerds. So you think about just how to store, terabytes, petabytes of data at scale, how to make sense of it, and obviously how to put it to work. So that's actually what Klaviyo started as. A lot of people think of us as a, marketing platform and now a combined CRM platform, marketing, service, and analytics together. But we actually started out just building the data infrastructure to make it really easy. We think of this brain, we just absorb all this information and help you remember who your customers are so that then you could apply logic to it. And that's obviously where AI comes in, and then put it out in the world, right? So you could do, marketing that converts really, really well. And yeah, so from those, kind of databasey roots, our first customers, we asked them what are you doing with Klaviyo? And they said, well, we're exporting the data into, at the time, what were some of the market leading marketing softwares. And we said, hey, what if we did that too? And they said, that would be awesome. So I remember, that weekend, the next couple of weeks, we built out what was the first version of kind of, Klaviyo for email, and then Klaviyo for text messaging and WhatsApp and mobile. And that's grown into over 180,000 customers, all the way around the globe. Now we feel like we're working with some of those same iconic brands I mentioned, but also the businesses and brands that we think are going to define, the next 20 years, right? Your Glossier's, your Away, some of the great brands, Liquid Death, and some of the other brands that we love, Mattel, Hot Wheels, Barbie. So yeah, it's been fun so far, but that's still got a long way to go.
I have to ask, because I saw online that you studied physics and astronomy in college. Do you, in this job, in this role, find any use for that knowledge that you spent so many years attaining?
Yeah, I'll tell you, so I took this course in college that I wish they taught this to everybody. We should actually run a course inside of this on Klaviyo if I teach a business school. But it's about kind of, what I'll call napkin math. I think a lot of people, when they think about sizing, hey, is this a problem worth solving? What's this opportunity? One of the things you get taught in physics especially is just kind of thinking in orders of magnitude. So I was a kind of an astronomy major as well. And so if you think about like reasoning about the distance between objects, say like stars or galaxies, like actually matters quite a bit.
Yeah.
And we just say, it's like, well, it's really, really far. It's like that old Star Wars trailer. It's like, well, really, really far away, a long, long time ago. It's like, well, actually, what are we talking here? Are we talking like a light year, 10 light years, 100 light years? Like, and that actually makes a bit of a difference. And so I find a lot of things are similar. People like to, when they're thinking about like, well, how hard is this project? They'll tend to think in terms of these orders of magnitude. Like, is it an hour? Is it a day? Is it a week? Is it a month? It's, 3 months is a year. And I think actually getting pretty good at reasoning about that matters a lot. And actually, I think I find some people, their intuition isn't great on that. And so sometimes just work on that. So this doing napkin math, thinking in orders of magnitude is actually quite powerful.
That sounds actually really useful for somebody who's building something. So as we've established, you're an entrepreneur. Now you're the CEO of a public company. You're a tech leader. I'm very curious to hear how you are thinking about AI and its potential influence in our world.
Yeah. I remember when the internet was kind of coming of age in the mid 2000s and building websites and how fun that was. And this has all the same feeling, the same vibes, if you will, as that. It's new tech. I think we're figuring it out, but there's like definitely a there. What I'm really excited about, and I'll stick to kind of retail here for a second, is this idea that every retail company is going to become more than just the products and the goods that they offer. I think most of them are also going to become service companies. And I think this is what happens, historically, like imagine if you offer a product, maybe having that like kind of personal assistant, that concierge was really hard. It's something we want to give to all of our consumers. But with AI, I think now that's possible. I think intelligence and knowledge, they're just going to become plentiful. And so all of a sudden, what we think of not only as retail businesses, they're going to start to become these hybrid retail and service businesses. And so now the question becomes, well, as a retailer, what services can I offer my customer? So I'll give you an example of actually something that one of our customers is doing now. So we got this longtime customer. They're this big educational like product company. They've got a mix of software and some other products. And they're nominally targeted at like, kind of elementary school kids. And so I remember when they first started with us, they had this dream of doing marketing where they're like, hey, when somebody becomes a customer of ours, we're going to build this big, long sequence of messages. And it's going to include things like coloring pages and like math and addition. And we're going to build all this out. And they're like, can you do this, Klaviyo? And we're like, yeah, of course, we got you. No problem, right? But it was all like one size fits all, right? I mean, one of my kids is big into Paw Patrol. The other is big into K-pop Demon Hunters. That's like making the rounds now. But they had to pick a thing, right? That education company now, I think it's not just going to be their products, but they're going to be able to tailor those to each customer. And they're going to let messaging and service and some of the experience around that. I mean, now the same education company is going to say, well, actually, maybe those coloring pages or those worksheets are going to be tailored maybe to the kid or to the student that's getting them. And that's just going to be part of what they offer. And so in some sense, I think we're going to move to this world where we don't think of retailers just purely as, hey, I need your product and I go use them. We're going to think about retail companies as solving like for an outcome or an end problem that we have. So in that case, it might be actually, hey, I want my kid or student of mine to learn. And sure, the products you offer, the physical goods are one part of that, but actually there's more to it. And if you can surround those products with what feel like services, because those are going to get a lot cheaper to create, all of a sudden the entire offering is better. And we can even move towards a world where we're doing actually more outcome-based stuff. I mean, another thing that we're, working on with a customer of ours, who's in the apparel space, they sell a lot of products, before you go on vacation. So you could think of, it could be like swimwear, right? Things you wear at the beach. And, one of the things we're talking with them about is we were helping them build this customer agent that acts as like a front, that their consumers can chat with. And we've talked about like, hey, what if the goal of this customer agent wasn't so much just to sell products or educate about products? What if it was to make sure every person that engaged with it had an awesome vacation? How would that change the value prop of your business? And they're like, well, that sounds incredible. Like, how do we do that? So it's really cool. Like now we're training this agents, right? Not only just like, today it's via, chat and text, but in the future it'll be voice. Agent that is actually saying like, hey, we'll help you pick out the perfect swimwear or like vacation attire, but also how do we help you make sure you have an awesome vacation? And some of that might mean even planning out, like, for instance, you go on vacation, how many swimsuits am I supposed to bring? Do I bring one? Do I bring multiple? So I think just the nature of what a retail company is going to change now that, intelligence is getting a lot easier and more accessible, to integrate into your products.
I really love that kind of vision of the future and the potential of all of this. And there's no denying that it's really exciting. But just like back when e-commerce started to kind of come up, there was also all that excitement was kind of intermingled with a lot of fear. So how are you responding to people who are scared about how rapidly this technology is advancing?
Yeah, well, I'd say two things. So, I remember in early e-commerce, I remember it was putting your credit card in on the internet. There was a lot of risk in some cases. There was a lot of fraud. And, now we think about the payment networks being really good at detecting that through, kind of machine learning signals. And it was AI back in the day. There's a lot of equivalence now of, now it's, hey, how do I make sure that AI isn't hallucinating answers? It's getting me the actual right information. And so, I think in a very similar way, there's a lot of work that we're doing, whether it's, as AI helps it apply to generating marketing creative. That's, does it meet your brand guidelines? Do we make sure that it's safe? Is it accurate, right? Is it, we're doing these things now, really cool stuff where we're able to take stock imagery that folks have taken of their products and now embed it in all of these different kinds of images and landscapes. So just give an example, like we've got a running company where we're taking pictures of the shoes and the apparel they have and putting it on models that are then in landscapes that are sort of geographically relevant. So you can imagine we're up in the Northeast, getting a little cold. So like, okay, maybe you got some, used to have the leaves falling. Maybe it's like starting to be, you get a little bit of snow on the ground. But like that doesn't make any sense, right, for a consumer that's say, in Florida. But all of this, like we have to make sure there's real safety and guardrails. And then we're doing the same with these, customer agents. I mean, we're finding incredible, consumers love this because it's, it's always on 24/7, really quick chat and service and guidance. But people want to make sure that those agents are well trained. So there's a lot of, stuff that we're doing similar to like, put some safety in there, but also help train up these agents so they can answer questions that maybe they haven't seen before. So I think the tech is getting there quite quickly. I think fast forward 6 months, 12 months, I think about e-com when I first started, probably took a good like 5 years, even 10 years for it to become more readily available. The good news is we're seeing consumers really want it, right? I mean, consumers are already shopping. The first move is to maybe, to AI versus, what used to be search. So that's happening. I think we just have to make sure that brands have the same tech, that it's sort of easy for them to make sure that things are, safe and, safe for consumers and, relevant to their business.
Yeah. So, I mean, speaking of the future, you recently released your AI shopping index to try to kind of get a window on where all this is going. And you found that AI assistants are set to become a standard part of our lives very soon, kind of to your point earlier. What else did you discover in this survey about where e-commerce is headed with all of this new tech?
Yeah. So I think this is probably no surprise, whether it's through Google or other search engines or ChatGPT and other, kind of AI agents. Everybody's starting and looking for these kind of AI summaries or LLM generated responses first. I think a lot of consumers, when we've surveyed them, they just look at it as like, it's a time saver. It just saves them time from clicking through a lot of links. I think they also, like it is like they're leaning on this to kind of summarize where the best deals are or help them find the right product for them. In general, consumers, when we search for things in a search engine, we tend to type in, maybe 4 or 5 words. But, when we're chatting, sometimes because it's over voice, we're just willing to say a lot more. And then there's this back and forth kind of user experience. So anyways, this like finding great deals, discovering new brands, which we think is super interesting, and finding sometimes more niche products or products that are really fit for a specific use case. That and the time savings. So what's really interesting is the fact that this is gone from really in the span of 12 months from something that people I think kind of used a little bit, but maybe it was the small minority. I mean, now it's the vast majority. It's not, we're well past 50%. The people we surveyed, it's 80% plus are using AI just as part of their regular shopping habits. And, obviously we'll use that for the holidays.
Yeah. I mean, also what's impressive is how quickly they're getting better and better and better. I mean, I remember it was not a year ago using Google AI overviews and finding errors or mistakes. That doesn't happen anymore. It's gotten so helpful, just even like on my end, researching stuff. So it's impressive how quickly it's improving as well.
Yeah. I think there's a corollary to this is as we integrate AI more into our own lives, I tend to think you go to places like Google or like ChatGPT first. I think, similar how it was Amazon, or eBay back in the 90s. I think what we're going to find is we're going to expect when we go to say somebody's website or we open a mobile app that all of a sudden this kind of chat or voice-based interface becomes more of a something that every business is going to offer. And I think that's really interesting because it's kind of a different modality, a different way from say, browsing a website, especially if you have a really deep catalog, giving people the opportunity to sort of, whether it's search or chat, and I think those two things are going to kind of merge, giving consumers this alternative way to kind of browse or find the thing they're looking for. I think it's going to become standard.
Retailers are entering a new era, one powered by AI and filled with opportunity. But they shouldn't have to go it alone. Meet Commerce, the new parent brand uniting BigCommerce, Feedonomics, and MakeSwift into one AI-driven ecosystem, connecting all the tools your business needs to adapt faster, scale smarter, and grow with confidence. Commerce's powerful selling solutions help brands turn data into discovery, create storefronts without bottlenecks, and build frictionless shopping experiences that your customers will love. Want to learn more? See how Commerce is powering what's next at commerce.com/retailremix.
So not surprisingly, Klaviyo has also released a range of its own AI solutions. Tell us a little bit about those, what you're hoping to solve for with your own AI tools.
We talked about Klaviyo as this CRM for consumer businesses. We think about those. We want to be the best B2C CRM. And we think about that as more than just software. We want software that can actually learn and get better, can take guidance, human input, and then optimize on its own and do more of the job. So let's talk about what that means. So we're tackling that really on two fronts: what it means for marketing, and then what it means for customer service, and when customers want to initiate a conversation. So on the marketing side, we're actually taking it from two lenses. The first is, how do we help you generate more marketing ideas, find insights in your data, whether that data is stored with Klaviyo or outside Klaviyo. So we're doing a lot of interesting things there. Like, we have a ton of information about which products sell through or maybe aren't selling through, and therefore, if you want to clear inventory, we can help you design a campaign, all through AI. So we can surface those insights to you. And also, for then consumer, which customers are your best customers, which customers are maybe were your best customers, but they've lapsed, which customers are maybe new customers, but they're probably very likely to come back, and surfacing these and kind of generating, using those inputs to then automatically generate complete campaigns. So, it's not really this Black Friday, Cyber Monday, this holiday period, but we've already worked on some tech where if you say, hey, I have the following products, this is my business, we can see the historical sales data. Hey, I'm launching a couple new product lines this year. I want to maximize, say, sales or profitability this holiday season. We think the AI is now at the point where we can just take that as a prompt and generate, draft out an entire holiday calendar campaign schedule, and then just, sort of show you what we think the, sort of expected value, like, hey, how much revenue do we need to generate, and some of the decisions we made, right? And then similar to what we expect with ChatGPT is you can edit and say, oh, no, actually, you know what? Like, that product, well, the release date shifted. We're going to ship it in, February now. So don't worry about that. And we can modify that calendar. We want to give everybody this kind of always on, we talk about marketing agent that's both part strategist and part, creative and execution. So we're really excited about that. And then on the flip side, with our customer agent, we take all the same raw intelligence, being able to calculate recommendations, understanding customer state. And then when somebody, chats in or calls in, being able to help guide them through this like customer service experience. And what's been really interesting is we found that for a lot of consumer businesses, they maybe historically thought about customer service as kind of people only, writing in when they have issues. What we found is if you make that more accessible now, and because the cost to deliver that service has gone down so much, a lot of businesses would say, hey, don't hide that in a hard to find 1-800 number or a page that's maybe 3 levels deep in your, your nav. Put it out front. And what we're finding is a lot of consumers actually want to have a conversation with that brand about, recommendations. So it's not just, customer service oriented and curious. That's where we got this idea of like, hey, maybe we should be more outcome oriented of what the consumer actually wants. If you're that apparel company, is like, what does it mean to have a great vacation?
Yeah.
Or if you're that education company, hey, what does it mean to help a kid maybe learn how to read or, learn how to do multiplication?
Yeah. Well, this all sounds fantastic from a consumer level. There's no denying that some of this work is stuff that has been previously done manually by humans, though. And AI now can just clearly do it faster, more iterations, better in some cases. So where do you see humans then fitting now into this kind of AI-powered future we're talking about?
Yeah, what happens to all of us? Yeah. Well, as somebody who was, aside from my physics background, I got into computer science and programming. Programmers are also having this kind of existential moment of like, what's our job now that, now that...
Journalists too.
Yeah, it's everywhere. So, but look, my strong belief is that I think that while the jobs change, we talk about, these retail companies becoming, companies that are service companies where they're providing more than just physical products. The reality is that even those companies, somebody still has to decide what are those experiences or services that you want to offer. So interesting things we found with our marketing agent is, well, it's doing a lot of creative and generation, right? It's almost prompting back to the users, hey, what do you think of this? And it's actually creating more and better and frankly, more creative ideas. So our kind of belief is that, well, I think many more businesses will be able to accomplish a lot more with relatively fewer folks. So actually, I think it just expands actually, the ambition of a lot of these companies. I don't think the jobs will change. I think you still think actually in the folks that really understand how things work, right? So when I talk to a lot of marketers, they're like, yeah, I know what good copywriting looks like. I just don't have time to do it. Or I have a good idea of like, how I want to execute this, but I don't have the time to do it. I mean, that base level of understanding still matters, but now they're able to take that and almost amplify it. They can run more campaigns, better campaigns. They can take on more personalization. I've talked to a bunch of businesses that are like, man, we're excited because we can apply this across more of our brands. We can launch new product lines as a result of this, or just we talked about level up the customer experience. So I don't think anybody should, I guess the jobs will change, but I think ultimately we're going to see more retailers, I think, that become almost this pseudo hybrid retailer plus, content or experience business. There's actually, I think we're seeing another boom in like, kind of retail and entrepreneurship there. And yeah, we're just excited to see what people create.
So switching gears a bit, you have referred to Black Friday, Cyber Monday as your Super Bowl. And so I was hoping you could kind of just take us behind the scenes of BFCM at Klaviyo. Tell us what game day looks like over there.
Yeah, well, as just like the Super Bowl, the season starts early. So we've been at it now for several months. And I can tell you that this has evolved a lot in our, 14, 15 years. So a couple of things, we're very proud of the scale that Klaviyo handles. We have, I think it's almost 10 billion unique profiles in the Klaviyo database. So there's just a ton of information.
Wait, 10 billion is more than there are humans on the earth.
I know. So it's like, well, you and I are probably in there a couple times as well. So like this. So that's actually an interesting question. I should also know the number of like kind of unique individuals that are there. But even some, we tend to think of like every relationship between a person and a business is like this kind of unique entity.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's what we mean by that. So those are getting updated, billions of times a day. So you can think of like all this data about, people visiting a website, having a conversation with somebody, getting a message, do they respond or not? What do they think of it? And that, collectively annually is generating almost $100 billion in sales for businesses. So anyways, we take all this really seriously because you can imagine there's enormous demand over the holiday weekend. So we spent a lot of time testing our systems to make sure that one, they'll scale. We actually test them to, roughly double, sometimes even higher, the actual throughput we think we're going to get. So we feel really good about that.
Yeah.
And then, when it gets down to game time, it's interesting. We have this big, almost like Jumbotron that we built. It keeps all of the analytics and stats. So if you're around the office, that, Thanksgiving, Black Friday, Cyber Monday over the weekend, you can see these things in real time. And then when folks are actually celebrating Thanksgiving, we actually have a couple of little like kind of fun dashboards we build internally that folks can, bring home, show to their family and friends. Because when they're kind of, working hard, that just show like some of our stats that can show off, some of these, things of how many messages we've sent, how much data we've ingested.
Yeah.
And then once we wrap up, we always have a big party, at the end of Monday. People are usually pretty tired and kind of like thankful that, we've made it through the holiday season. But yeah, we'd like to celebrate that a little bit too.
Yeah. How cool to be able to work on something so intensely for so long, but then actually in real time, like see the results as they're coming in. That is really cool. It is very much like a sporting event in a way. That's really cool. So when the holiday season wraps up, which will be sooner than we imagine, even though it's all we can think about right now, what will you be looking to next? Like, what do you think that 2026 has in store for retailers and for retail marketers specifically?
Well, it's back to what we talked about at this leveling up of the experience. I think every retailer needs to think about beyond the products that they offer, what's the experience they're delivering to customers. And I'll maybe give you like one more anecdote of something that we're playing with now. With retailers, and we work with a mix of, digital e-commerce businesses and also brick and mortar offline business, and then obviously a lot of folks that do a little bit of both. We're just thinking about every aspect of what would make a great shopping experience for someone. And so one of the things that we're playing with now is this idea of our customer agent and, hey, what would it look like to bring that even into a store? I think, this unlocking this holy grail of like, what's this, a digital consumer to like come in the store and how does that experience stay cohesive? We're playing with some things of whether it's a mobile app, almost even having an audio version of, hey, could you walk into a store? So I'll give you an example. I went to one of the home improvement stores and we build a little hockey rink in our backyard every year for our kids. And, not only do you have to, kind of get the bill of goods of like, hey, the things you got to go buy, but man, wouldn't it be awesome if our customer agent could give you like almost an audio powered, like, stick an earbud in, powered experience as you walk around the store, giving you ideas for how to maybe level up our design this, for us this winter to make it even better, but then that can direct you around the store, right? So you imagine, I think in the future of fashion could be is, hey, your personal concierge may be in your ear helping, hey, I'm looking for, some new things to wear for the winter, for the spring. Give me like almost my personal assistant, personal shopping assistant. And that's somebody who's always on, and it can be a very personal relationship, right? You can share them with things you may not be comfortable with sharing with a stranger. So All of this to say is I think retailers need to think about what does personalization mean, and then how can you extend that to every surface, whether it's messaging, whether it's your digital services, your website, your mobile app, and then obviously like the in-store experience and this like customer service experience. And I think all of those are going to get cohesive. It's going to hand off seamlessly. There's going to be no more of this. I flip, I switch which channel or where I am, and I have to remind it who I am. All of that will just follow me around. So we're very excited to help bring that tech, to fruition. And then obviously like see what kind of creative things people build with it.
Yeah, next evolution of the omnichannel ideal, I guess. You sound like you're really bullish on voice. You've mentioned it a couple times because a lot of these experiences, as we said, are still very text-based, but you keep mentioning eventually maybe with voice. What kind of a device do you envision? Is this like, are you thinking like once smart glasses become more common, or what do you foresee for this future where we're not having to type everything in?
Yeah, and I think some things could be very multimodal too. Like I could see us kind of on our phones where if we need a visual, right, that's where we're looking, but audio. And I think that's right. I think headphone tech is there where a lot of us can have a conversation. It could be glasses like you're describing. I think at home, it could be, we could see a renaissance of some of the, in-home devices that we used to have. I think there's something interesting. It obviously depends a little bit by category. I mean, we're seeing great success with chat as a medium. I just think anything that allows people to be more personal, interact in ways that feel very human and very native.
Yeah.
So I think voice is very interesting. We're actually even experimenting. I mean, this is very early, but we're even experimenting with video in what does it mean to have an avatar that you can interact with? I think a lot of people almost find that a little disconcerting, right? Because we're used to doing retail as being a somewhat private experience, especially in the digital world. But anyways, we just want to, I think the nature of what it means to shop, to browse, like that's just going to change so much because a lot of this is going to get more accessible to more businesses. And like I said, we want to build kind of some of those building blocks, build a platform that people can then, build on top of. And we'll see. Like we're going to find out there's some new experiences that are going to become commonplace that we don't even know about yet.
All right, great. Well, before we let you go, we do have a few final quick questions for you in our Mixtape Rapid Fire section. Are you ready for these ones?
Let's do it.
Okay. What is your favorite Black Friday memory?
All right. So almost 10 years ago, back in 2017, we had our biggest Black Friday ever. And I mentioned we have a party afterwards. Well, that year, I must have been in a really good mood or something. Somebody convinced us, and we flew the entire company, which at the time was probably about 150 people, to Buffalo, New York, because we're a Boston-based business, to go watch the New England Patriots. So I think that was an awesome team, really crushed it. Everybody rallied. And then, it was probably our biggest and best celebration ever.
I bet it's also the best memory for all those people who got to go too.
It helped with recruiting for a lot of years after the fact.
What's your biggest marketing pet peeve as a consumer?
I know this is shocking, but I still get some like bad mail merges from companies where, you could just tell that it's, and hopefully AI will obviate all this. But man, I hate marketing experience where somebody's trying to market you, but actually it does a disservice to their brand. You almost pull back.
Yeah.
So I still get some of those where it's, hi, so-and-so, but it's not me.
Right.
And you're like, oh, this actually works against you, right?
Yeah. There's something off-putting about it, even when you're being generous and this is just the system did that. It's not the company's really their fault, but still you're kind of like, you should know my name.
Totally.
What's the hardest thing about going from a private to a public company?
I would say there's been anything super difficult about it. One of the things that we've had to wrestle with is we've always been a very transparent company. And, I think when we initially were thinking about what it means to be a public company, we had to figure out how much we change those norms. I think luckily we found a really good grounding where we're still can be, effectively as transparent as we were, 5-10 years ago, when we were pre-public. But I think that was one of the hardest things is that people think things have to change and you sort of have to rebel against that and say, no. Like that's not, nobody actually wrote a rule that said, we can't share those statistics, right? Or talk about our strategy. Yeah. It's almost one of the harder parts about becoming a bigger company. I think people just make assumptions about the way that, companies that have more people or public work. And you have to kind of remind them, it's like, no, nobody wrote a rule that you have to work that way.
These aren't laws. Yeah. Interesting. Okay. So as we mentioned, you studied astrophysics at college. So I'm hoping, do you have a fun space fact for us?
Yeah. When I was studying physics, I studied a lot of galaxies far, far away. And I think what always shocked me is, the average distance. So first of all, there are a crazy number of stars, just in our galaxy, billions. I mean, there's many, many more galaxies. So like this idea of like, hey, is there life out there is like almost certainly true. It just may be impossibly far away from us. The thing that always kind of bummed me out though is that like the distance between things in space is just crazy long. Like the distance to the nearest star from us is still light years away. So in some sense, despite the fact there's probably so many other smart, intelligent beings out there, life forms, we're kind of so far away from one another that it's just very unlikely, even over the course of history, that we'll really get to interact. So we'll see. Maybe we'll be able to invent some tech or discover some laws of physics to change that. But that always kind of bummed me out, is that there's, imagine somebody that's going to be so interesting to get to talk to, but they're sort of hopelessly out of reach.
I'm going to be thinking about that for a while. I can tell the idea of that it's almost a certainty that they're there, but we just will maybe never get to meet them. Yeah, it could be seen as a bummer, or also just really cool, how fantastically large the universe we live in is.
Totally.
Last one is, what accomplishment are you most proud of in your life?
There's a lot. Definitely very proud of, having kids. I think is an awesome thing. I'll tell you one thing that's a little bit Klaviyo related. We've got this great program that we've had for a long time, our intern program. It actually started when we were probably 15 folks. And, there was a student who was actually a high schooler who had just graduated high school, became an intern at our company, and actually wasn't sure they wanted to go on to, to college, to university. And we're maybe a little bit trying to figure out what they wanted to do in life. And I remember they came, to work. We were about 15 people, and they really found their tribe, or their kinds of people at, Klaviyo back in the early days. And I give all credit to the folks that were here then. It's so much so that, that person, then they decided they knew what they wanted to do in life. They decided they really got into programming. They went to college, they went to university, and I know now they're that they found a real passion in that. And so one of my favorite things is always this idea that, hey, I think we should be lifelong learners. If you don't know exactly what you want, the fact that we were a place where somebody could almost find themselves is just an awesome gift, an awesome thing that I think we could, pay it forward.
Yeah, that really is. Well, thank you, Andrew, so much for being here today and kind of helping us think about space and the future and where things on Earth might be headed next as we close out the 25 season of Retail Remix.
Awesome. Thanks, Cole.
And thanks to all of you for joining us. This is indeed our last episode of the year, so wishing everyone a happy holiday season. We'll be back with more episodes from the companies and executives shaping the future of retail in 2026. And in the meantime, reach out if you'll be at the NRF Big Show in January. We'll be recording live from the show and would love to see you there. Thanks, everyone. Talk to you all in 2026. Thanks for joining us for another episode of Retail Remix. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss a future episode. You can find us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, or your favorite podcast app. Until next time, keep mixing it up.